welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Robyn Smyers, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the City Club. I'm very pleased to welcome to our podium today Dr. Michael Roizen. He's an anesthesiologist by training, the Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic, and half of the creative force behind You, the Owner's Manual, a series of books about personal health. It's that last bit for which he's probably best known. Those books are part of the creation of the whole real age concept, a notion that your age isn't determined by the years you've been on the planet, but actually by how you've behaved during those years, what you've eaten, what kind of exercise you get or don't get. In his wellness work, he's also chairman of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic, where he has set up programs that have helped countless people quite literally turn their lives around. Dr. Roizen is the past chair of a Food and Drug Administration Advisory Committee and a former editor for 6 medical journals. He's published more than 165 peer-reviewed scientific papers, 100 textbook chapters, 30 editorials, and 4 medical books, 1 a medical bestseller, and received 13 U.S. and many foreign patents. And that's not all. I'm really not sure when he sleeps. You see him on TV and in magazines all the time, and he's as likely to be chatting with Oprah Winfrey as he is a reporter for Fortune magazine. He's also been influential right here in Northeast Ohio. Among his local initiatives, he started a farmers market close to the Cleveland Clinic's main campus. He mentors children in public schools and started smoking cessation and weight loss programs, and has encouraged walking programs for Cleveland Clinic employees. Dr. Roizen is here today as part of the Year of Vitality series at the City Club of Cleveland, presented by Medical Mutual. The Year of Vitality is a partnership of the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission and the 2013 Summer National Senior Games to be hosted here in Cleveland this summer. Dr. Roizen has given more than 1,200 lectures on medical topics, many of which have the power to change people's lives. Even with all of this, he still finds time to continue practice anesthesiology and internal medicine. He's biologically 67 years old, but at last count, his real age was 42.8. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Michael Roizen to the City Club.
I'm pleased to be here, and especially in the Year of Vitality, and I want to thank the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission and especially Medical Mutual for sponsoring this. I consider vitality probably the most important thing right now in our national debate and national history, and that's why I feel privileged to be at the City Club. This is the graph that I wake up to every morning. It's what drives me every day. If you look at it, that blue line, and I apologize to the radio listeners, I'm going to try and describe it, but that blue line, and by the way, I just see Dan Malthrop, I want to thank you for being in your first week as the CEO. We should give a hand to him because it's a tremendous recruit. But the blue line, this graph was created by the Congressional Budget Office. It assumes a 2.5% growth rate in GDP for the next 70 years. The blue line is our national expenditures of everything in the federal budget except for health. Includes Social Security, includes defense, and you notice over the next 70 years, that goes down as a percent of GDP. We have only one problem for national security. We have only one problem for our debt. We have only one problem in our budget deficit and our competitiveness as a country. That's that red line of health. And you see that goes straight up almost to a point where it inhibits and now is squeezing out education, social programs, and even defense. That's the line we have to do something about. And in fact, that line is caused, or the shape of that line, that increase, is caused by 2 factors. One, the aging of the population, and that's actually a minor factor in it. The much greater factor is the amount of chronic disease we have. I say that this is part of the legacy of Toby Cosgrove. He's part of the, if you will, the group that's leading the summer games, the National Senior Games. But in fact, he started this to say the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland cannot continue to lead medicine in the nation unless we do something about the influx of chronic disease, because it will wipe out our standard of living and our jobs if we don't do something about it. The good news is 4 factors cause 75% of our chronic disease. So we could turn that curve downward if we got control of those 4 factors. They are tobacco, physical inactivity. You've heard 2 of those mentioned already in the introduction. Food choices and portion size, and unmanaged stress. Just imagine, instead of spending 18 or 19% of our gross domestic product on health care, we could spend 5% and devote the rest to social programs, education, and those things we really care about. We could do that if we wanted to. So this curve, with that red line going straight up, could really turn downward. And that was the question Toby asked, if you will, 7 or 8 years ago when we formed the Wellness Institute. Can we test this in our 43,000 employees and see if we can turn that curve downward and thus help lead the nation by telling and showing them what we can do and what you can do? By the way, we alone are not getting fat. It started in 1980, but you see every other country is getting fat too. The problem in America is we're just so far out in front. You know, they say lead from ahead. This is one we should not have led from ahead, because leading from ahead on this one, being so far out in front, costs us job competitiveness, costs us our standard of living, and costs us a lot of the things we care about. The Senior Games has a long relationship with Cleveland, and I want to just bring that up. The first speaker at the National Senior Games under the arch in St. Louis when it launched, spoke to 100,000 people, was a Clevelander, Bob Hope. And that tradition, in fact, I'm glad it's come home, if you will, to Cleveland where the games are. The goal, promote healthier lifestyles through education, fitness, and sport. And this is the year of vitality. So I'm going to speak about that. And we're going to come to the conclusion, or at least ask the question, can physical activity play a role, a substantial role, in changing the shape of the curve? Before I get there, I like to think about how we think of aging. And most people in America think of aging as you hit your peak quality of life between 25 and 35, and then it's all downhill. And it is. If you do nothing about it, every function in your body goes down at about 5% every 10 years, except for women where bone mass goes down 10% in the 10 years surrounding menopause. But what goes down at 5%? Our muscle mass, our bone mass, our cardiac, our heart function, our lung function, our liver function, even our IQ. This is the IQ of Harvard physicians. The study started in 1952, and their IQs are still going down, those that are alive. But it goes down at the same, it tells you who you should choose as your physician, right? But it goes down at the rate of 5% every 10 years, the same as every other function. But if you look at what we call the error bars, or the range, you'll see some don't have any decrease. In fact, 25% don't have any decrease in their brain function as they age. And that's the key. How do each of us, how do you become one of those 25% that doesn't lose function as you age? That's really the curve. The curve isn't one solid red line, but is a family of curves. Under the age of 25, those genes that penetrate usually are strong enough they take you where you want to be, where they want you to be. But over the age of 25, whether you're at the top of your curve or at the bottom, is largely your choice. That is, you get to control your genes. We now know that, in fact, 80% of your total DNA isn't genes, it's switches that control those genes. And we know to a large degree how lifestyle can alter whether your gene is on or off. When we look at this, I always ask a question. So, Robyn, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm challenging the cameraman. Do you know why Dr. Oz and I put cartoons in our books?
To keep us interested?
It's so guys will read it, that's right. But this is the cartoon that describes that. And what happens here, as you see this first decrease, that's what the great hospitals of the world, the Cleveland Clinics and the University Hospitals and the Metro. And you don't realize, but we have 3 of the best systems ever in any place in the world right here. So we're fortunate to be here. But in fact, the great hospitals get you back to that same curve. But that's a bad curve, if you notice. That has a lot of disability with it. We think you can get to this higher curve and then near the end get struck by lightning and die. And that's the real object. This period, this area between here and here, between those 2 curves, is actually the disability you get to compress by getting healthy. It really is those 4 things that we mentioned that are key to that. And we're going to see that exercise does compress disability. That is, by getting healthier, you not only, with exercise, you not only live longer, but you live longer with less disability, so that you actually compress disability to have many healthier years. Let me go and now talk about tobacco as an example of what we think society has to do and how we have to compress this, if you will. So tobacco is still the largest healthcare cost in America. It still kills 1 out of every 5 Americans, and it is the largest cost in disability in the United States, both under 65 and over 65. The interesting thing is the non-smoker lives about, and this is how long they live, the percent alive, the non-smoker shown here in red lives about 10 years longer than the smoker. If that's all that happened, we wouldn't really care about it. It would be somebody's individual choice. But what also happens is they have about 18 years of disability. And every one of us pays for that. Because whether it's Medical Mutual or the government, the insurance is pooled, the rates are pooled, and every one of us pays for every other smoker, even if you don't have secondhand smoke. And secondhand smoke is now recognized as a much greater problem than it ever was. And again, cigarette smoking is the largest cause of disability we have. The great news is if you stop smoking before age 35 and before 20-pack years, you live just as long as someone who never smoked, and you have no disability. So we get a do-over. Even from tobacco use, you get a do-over. Now, let me show you how great secondhand smoke is by going through a series of cities. In Pueblo, Colorado, the 27% reduction in heart attacks after they banned public smoking in the non-smokers. 41% reduction in the non-smokers after 36 months. In Scotland, a 17% reduction in heart attacks and acute coronary syndromes in 18 months. In Monroe County, Indiana, 77% reduction in heart attacks in people who weren't smokers who were at low risk. In Minnesota, a 33% reduction in heart attacks and a 17% reduction in cardiac deaths. So the secondhand smoke is an important consideration. What did we and what did Toby Cosgrove and the Cleveland Clinic decide to do? Well, in 2006, we prohibited smoking on our campuses. Looking back on it, you'd say, no big deal, right? But it was, at that time, a big deal. And we offered, and we had to. We felt that it wasn't just to ban it, we had to try and get and help our employees get healthier, so we offered free smoking and tobacco cessation, not free smoking cessation programs. And we did it by, we care about their health, and we wanted to do it, and we did it wrong at first, but I'm going to make an important point about the smoking cessation program being free in just a second. And we had a program that really worked. It had an 84% success rate over 1 year at getting people to quit and stay quit. What happened, if you will, was that we then, for the first time, Cleveland Clinic publicly got politically active when the No on 4, Yes on 5 campaign started. it was being a confused campaign, right? Was it yes on 4, no on 5, et cetera? Well, one, the yes on 5 was a law that would ban public smoking, but a constitutional amendment was 4 that somebody else promoted, you can guess who, to allow a constitutional amendment saying you had to allow smoking in public places. Because it got confused, the Cleveland Clinic said we have to take a role in helping make people understand they should vote no on 5, yes on no on 4, yes on 5. And in fact, we did that, and we're partially credited, along with Medical Mutual and a number of others, in helping defeat the constitutional amendment and get the law that means there is no public smoking in Ohio. We then, Toby said, we have to do something for the community, and he offered free smoking cessation using our plan to anyone in Cuyahoga County who wasn't otherwise covered. And Medical Mutual and a number of the insurance companies joined in and helped us offer this so that people could quit, and over 16,000 people quit. Show you how big an event that was, follow the red line. We were the second highest county at 26.5% of our adults smoked in 2003. We went to the lowest county in the state in 2009. What does that mean? You should clap for yourselves because a number of you were instrumental in this. But what does that mean? Well, we save in the community, even at this rate, $330 million a year in medical costs. When that gets factored after 5 years, it takes a little reservoir to get it to filter through. But that $330 million means our companies, your companies, and you can be more competitive and more likely to have a job. That's a big deal. Then we stopped hiring smokers. Yeah, there were a couple of death threats thrown around, and they were serious. My office got moved to a place where it was harder to shoot at me with a rifle. But they died out. I do not mean these phrases. I'm still alive. The threats died. And why was this such a big deal for hospitals? Because nurses and transporters, two things we're chronically short of, had relatively high smoking rates. And all the hospitals were afraid we wouldn't be able to staff ourselves adequately to care for patients. But it turned out there's a good indication that we had 17 more applications for everyone that didn't apply because of the rule, and a lot of hospitals have followed us now. The prevalence in our own population went from 15.4%, it's a little below 6% now, it will get to under 2% in 2020. How big is that? We save now about $8 million a year, which we pass back to employees in lower health care costs, and it's just part of the thing that we will be doing to try and make Cleveland Clinic more competitive, to try and make Northeast Ohio more competitive for jobs. But guess what? Ohio didn't follow suit. A prior governor took all the dollars out of tobacco prevention in Ohio, $50 million a year. That costs you, starting about 2 years from now, $500 million more in taxes, because that's what it will cost to pay for the medical care of those covered by government insurance programs. And our in fact, businesses will pay $500 million additional to that. That's $1 billion for taking $50 million away. It's the largest tax increase we've ever had, was removing tobacco prevention, because that is such a great cost. Toby has worked with the regents to encourage smoking cessation on the college campuses, and that's now filtering through CSU. Thank you. What we further did, if you look at all of our programs in wellness, and I'll come back to that, in 7 years, we at the Cleveland Clinic have taken our own cost in chronic disease new incidents from, in fact, the costs increasing at 9% per year, just like everybody else's, to this year or last year, they decreased for the first time on an absolute dollar cost. And that's in face of a 6% increase in provider charges and 9% increase in pharmaceuticals. And our chronic disease, which had been increasing at 10%, the reservoir in the population. Type 2 diabetes, we had 4,000 in 2003, 4,400 in 2004, 4,903 in 2005. Last year it decreased. This is possible, and the Year of Vitality is a place to start it off and to continue it for the whole community. I saw Joe Sipperman here who's leading some of the effort, so thank you, Joe. I don't know where you are, but thank you for doing that in the community. Let's now look at, in fact, exercise. And again, the question is, can physical activity do this? And we believe it can, obviously. We've made our fitness centers, our curves, and our yoga classes free. Why? Because we learned an important lesson. Instead of reimbursing tobacco 83 to 89%, which we had done before this program, we made it first dollar free. And when we made it first dollar free, 4 times as many people signed up the first day of first dollar free as had signed up in the prior 4 years. So we said we should do this to take away any barrier to getting healthy, because the dollar value of vitality is so important. And in fact, our fitness center usage has gone up from about 2,500 hours a month to this last month it was 31,000 hours. You can do this. This can be done in Cleveland. So when I ask about exercise and ask people, people say, these are the questions I want to know. Does physical activity promote health, and if so, how? If you start or restart physical activity later in life, say at 65 or 75, do you get some of the benefits? Do you get all of the benefits? Does physical activity extend lifespan? Does it compress morbidity? What is the minimum amount I can do and get the maximum health benefit? And then the last question is usually asked to me by a spouse of a marathon runner. Can you do too much physical activity? Let's go. Exercise in mid and later life. The data are remarkable. Decreases heart attacks by 55%, decreases heart failure deaths 65%, decreases infection rate by 95%, decreases cancer deaths by 45%, decreases the most important thing you can do for your brain, and I'm going to show you that, isn't those games. It isn't listening to WCPN. It is actually doing exercise while you listen to WCPN. This is basically one of the curves. As you can see, and you can ignore those are numbers of deaths, but this is mortality rate, and this is for the inactive person who started at age 65, and you can see over the next 4 to 10 years, they went from a mortality rate of about 26 per thousand down to about 10 per thousand. And yes, there is a little bump up if you do too much physical activity. But basically, you reduce your death rate by 60%, and your disability even greater than that. For men, they live about 8 years longer, women about 9 years longer. And we have a lot of studies now. It isn't one study that shows this. We have more studies on this probably than we do on statins. That's supposed to be a joke, guys. University of Pennsylvania, classes of 1937 to 40 participated in this. They're 95 to 98, so they looked at the Medicare cost data and said, what happened to the ones who exercise versus non? Harvard University classes have done it all along. Bay Area Runners Club, very clever study, which I'll show in a second. The Jerusalem longevity cohort started at 70, 78, or 85, said, what happened? The Cooper Center studies and our own studies from the Cleveland Clinic. And what they show is something like this. The Bay Area Runners Club took professors, literally professors, at Stanford and Berkeley, and those that ran, they compared with those that didn't, and that were otherwise exactly the same health, same BMI, same other factors, same smoking rates. And they were 58 at the start, on average. The runners' time to 15% disability, that's when it starts affecting your quality of life, was 19 years versus 7 years for the people who didn't do physical activity. A 12-year compression of disability, a tremendous amount. If you look at the Cooper Center studies, if you segregate it into fitness quintiles, the most fit quintile at age 50 was able to do, if you will, 14 METs, or 11 for women. They had 45% of the chronic disease throughout the rest of their life. Just imagine bending that curve down by 45%. That's what would happen to the Medicare costs if everyone did that. In fact, if everyone just gets 4 Mets more fit, which is very easy to do, we save over $100 billion a year in medical costs. That's irrespective of tobacco, irrespective of stress, irrespective of food choices. We can save that by just everyone in this room and all your compatriots across America saying, I'm going to get 4 Mets more fit, which isn't very tough.
What's a Met?
A Met is a metabolic equivalent. We'll take that in the question and answer period. This is the disability. I got too much to say in 5 minutes. This is the disability rates, and you can see those who didn't exercise had much greater disability rates at all ages than those who exercised. And in fact, midlife fitness makes you healthier later on. You get a do-over at any age. Now, in the Jerusalem longevity studies, they looked at people who were 70 or 78 or 85 when they started exercise or when they changed from no exercise to exercise. And guess what? They get a benefit and a longevity thing even when you started at age 85. So from these studies, we not only know you get a benefit, but we know what the minimum exercise is to get maximum benefit. And the minimum to get maximum benefit is 3 things. The first is 10,000 steps a day. Why is 10,000 steps a day better than 8,000? We have no idea. Why don't you get any more benefit at 12,000 than you do at 10,000? We have no idea. Can you do it without a pedometer? No. How do you know when you got 10,000? So you need a pedometer or something. But it is 10,000 that decreases the risk of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes substantially and all the other chronic diseases. How do you do that? You start with walking in a buddy. You get 2 great pedometers. Why 2? Because you never want to be out without one. And you can start with any you feel. I had a lady, and this is really an important study for me, if you will, an important patient. She was in a wheelchair, and I had given one of these talks, so she emailed me, because I show my email, and she said, I'm in a wheelchair. How am I going to do 10,000 steps? And of course, I thought about pushing the wheelchair with her hands, but I said, do you walk to the bathroom? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, I'm going to send you 2 pedometers. Tell me how many steps you take in a day. She took 66 steps. And I said, okay, don't do any day with less than 66 steps. I didn't know what she was going to do. She said, I'm going to do at least 4 steps more a day. She got rid of her walker 2 years ago. She got rid of her wheelchair 2 years ago. She got rid of her walker last year. She does 10,000 steps a day because she increased on average 6 steps a day. Virtually anyone can do this. She's actually doing component 2, which is weightlifting. So this is not walking your dog. So you should call a buddy. You should get a buddy. And the buddy should not be a male buddy. This is a male buddy. You'll see him come up. And this guy is running a little bit at the end of his 10,000 steps. He's stretching out as appropriately. His buddy is coming along. What's his buddy going to do? I'm not going to tell you that his buddy is eating a candy bar. That's not fair. But he's like every other male. He doesn't ask one question. He sees a problem and tries to fix it immediately, and he's going and fixing that problem with that guy. And that's a male buddy. No questions asked, no help. As opposed to a female buddy, and she encourages you to run a little, walk a little faster. And when you need to be picked up, she comes along and picks you up. And I thank Bob Savage for these. But in fact, that's really true. If you call your buddy at 6:15 every day and say, I walked my 10,000 steps, if you haven't called her by 6:30, she calls you and tells you, I need a walk. She takes ownership of the problem. So you really do want a female buddy. How do you increase it? That's right. Start any way you want. Get 2 pedometers, get a buddy, and add to it. Now, the other 2 components of physical activity are important. The first is weightlifting. That is doing 30 minutes. You can do it by leaning against a chair, literally, and sitting down. That is, get your toes out in front of your knees. But that's, if you do that against the wall, you build the muscles around it. You don't need fancy equipment. You don't even need to be in a health club. You need to know how to do push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and a few other things that you can do around the home. 30 minutes a week is all it takes. What do we do in the country? Well, the CDC set pretty low standards, 2.5 hours a week of walking and 2 or more days of if you will, of muscle building. What do? Only 1 in 5 Americans gets it. This is not a political map. This is a map. If you look, the middle of the country doesn't do anything. Ohio is in the average, if you will. The highest in the country is 27% in Colorado. Ohio, we're a little better than average at 21%. The year of vitality is a year to get a buddy and to get someone else involved in it. The third thing is cardio, 21 minutes, 3 times a week, and that's all it takes. How do you tell if you're at that cardio rate? Is 80% of your age-adjusted max, which is 220 minus your calendar age, or sweating in a cool room is what is cardio, if you will. So those 3 components are what you do. What happens if you do it? You improve your memory. I told you one of the most important things for your memory was your brain. It's the hippocampus. So memory gets processed through your hippocampus, and you'll notice these 3 nuclei at the bottom. They go down when you get dementia. Those are the hippocampal nuclei. The most important sign we have for memory is your hippocampal nuclei. Guess what? Just 3 20-minute sessions a week. 3 20-minute cardio sessions a week. And this is in 35 to 40-year-olds. It's also been done in 65 to 70-year-olds, as well as 25 to 30-year-olds. And you increase hippocampal size by 23%. There's only one organ in the body where size matters. It's the brain. And it's your hippocampus. So, and you can increase that with exercise. So we're going to go quickly. Walk tests. If you can do 400 yards in less than 6 minutes, you're fine. If you then do crunches, 10 minutes at age 65, 5 every 10 years under that. Push-ups, 10 at age 65. Maximum heart rate or METs, 220 minus your calendar age and your recovery from that. Those are things you can tell where you are on the fitness scale. Can you get too much physical activity? The answer is yes. If you exceed your antioxidant capacity of your muscle cells, that's about 2 hours of continuous physical activity. So if you do a marathon or you do a sport steadily for more than 2 hours, you can get there and you can, in fact, not get the maximum benefit. You still get more benefit than people who aren't doing any, but you can overcome it. Is there a substitute for physical activity, food or drug, etc.? No. That's why the year of vitality is so important. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're listening to a Friday forum featuring Dr. Michael Roizen, co-founder of Real Age Inc. and Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. We will return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of our many radio station partners across the country. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ, PBS, IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. We welcome guests today at tables hosted by Baker Hostetler, Cuyahoga Community College, Commercial Real Estate Women, Councilman Joe Simperman, Kent State University, Medical Mutual, and Richard Bowen and Associates. Thank you for your support. Today's forum is the Medical Mutual Endowed Forum on Healthcare, made possible by a generous gift from Medical Mutual to the City Club Forum Foundation. Joining us today at the head table is Rick Kirkosa, President and CEO of Medical Mutual, and Sue Tyler, Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer of Medical Mutual. Will you both please stand to be recognized? We would also like to welcome students to today's program. Student participation is made possible from the Charles E. Spar Charitable Trust Foundation. Today we welcome students from Gilmore Academy, John Adams High School, and Chagrin Falls High School. Will the students please stand and be recognized? Now we return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is City Club Development Associate Michael Grimaldi and Program Director Carrie Miller. First question, please.
Good afternoon. You know, so often good habits are formed when you're young, and with the school funding issues all over the country, quite often the first subjects that are cut when there are funding problems are physical education, music, art, and so forth. So my question is, have you had an audience with school district decision makers, legislators, to talk to them about the importance of physical activity while children are young?
We've done that in what I would call a subtle way with the CMSD and the inner ring schools here and with a few other school districts. So obviously food choices are important as well. Joe Sipperman and our current superintendent, as well as Regis Balaban, who heads the Cleveland Public Schools food program, have all been helpful in doing that. And the Cleveland Public Schools will get the Eat Right at School, we understand, for 0 to 8th or 1 to 8th grades, kindergarten to 8th grades, sometime in the fall. Akron has already achieved that in many of the inner rings. The second thing we were going to tackle and are going to tackle in the pediatric group and orthopedic group at the Cleveland Clinic is going to be working with the Cleveland Public Schools and other schools to try and get that in. And it's not just an effort of Cleveland Clinic, but it's of the multiple hospital systems here. If you will, there are some states that mandate physical activity in schools and haven't eliminated it, such as Texas. I don't want to hold Texas up as a model for everything, but it has been a model at getting physical activity back in schools. And there's a lot of benefits to physical activity. The kids learn better when they're physically active. They learn better when they have BMIs that are lower. So one of the projects has been, and the governors have kept it in the budget to do projects on looking at the BMI of kids. One of the projects we've done with the school district, one of the inner ring school districts, has been showing that the kids who get thinner, that is, whose BMIs get more normal, actually do better academically. And so there is a major reason to do what you say, but obviously school budgets are stretched. Why are they stretched? Come back to that first slide, right, or the second slide. They're stretched because we are spending so much on medical care, illness care. We could spend it the other way and have a lot of extra money for social programs, for education, and even for defense. We don't have to squeeze those down the way we are now. But we need to take responsibility as individuals. You need to, and everyone else does. It isn't a school organization. It isn't just a parent. It's everybody needs to get us, if you will, more vital so that we don't spend the money on illness care. There's no reason we should be spending it so much on that we squeeze everything else out of our budget.
Dr. Roizen, thank you for your inspiration and humor on this very serious subject. There's some researchers who are doing work around macronutrients and micronutrients, and they hypothesize that diets that are rich in micronutrients can reverse existing diseases like diabetes and immune system diseases and can prevent other diseases like cancers and dementia. What's your opinion?
So if I can broaden the question is, what's the relative merits of physical activity, tobacco cessation, stress management, and food choices and portion size, or micronutrients and macronutrients? And the answer is we don't know. We do know that each plays a role, and you can see, for example, in the runners study where there's no difference in nutrients between the two groups and no difference in a whole bunch of things between the two groups, including tobacco rates, etc., that physical activity makes a difference. When you hold everything else and you just change food, for example, you eliminate red meat or red meat and egg yolks, you can decrease, and all the other components of saturated fat, you can decrease disease also. So there are clearly indications that we change which of our genes are functioning. That's a big concept. You know, we change which of our genes are on or off. All genes do are they're protein factories. And whether your genes are on or not are dependent on your macronutrients and your micronutrients, are dependent on, if you will, your physical activity, on whether you smoke or not, and even whether you manage stress. So we now know that the major gene complexes that cause cancer, that cause inflammation, we know how to switch them on and off by your choices, those 4 things, and they represent a huge component. They don't lengthen the longest lifespan, but they decrease disability, and they seem to lengthen our lives towards the longer ends of the lifespan. So we know both how to lengthen lifespan and how to postpone disability, which from a public health standpoint, we know how to decrease the cost of illness care by 50% at least by doing what you suggest, which is appropriate diet, and I use that word, but doing those minimum physical activity, avoiding tobacco, and yes, managing stress. And all are doable by everyone almost.
Good afternoon, Dr. Roizen. Nice hearing you today. I want to take a moment out and say thank you to the clinic. I attended the Minority Men's Health Fair 2 weeks ago. Was told they were anticipating over 1,000 people to be there. And I'm wondering, the statistics we read about disparities in healthcare, what causes those disparities, and do you have any advice on how we can solve that problem? Thank you.
I try and speak on only subjects I know something about, and I'm an expert in, and I'm not as good in disparities as I'd like to be. Charles Modlin, maybe you can invite him up here sometime. He ran the Minority Men's Health Fair, obviously knows a lot about it. But when we've looked at it, is it genetic? There is a little genetics. Is it availability of health care? There's a little of that. And there's a lot of what I would call hereditary food and activity choices and stress changes. But I don't know the relative roles of all of those. What I meant by hereditary food is if you go into some of the areas, there's much more fried food in some areas than in others. And there's much more, if you will, of certain things that we think promote inflammation and disease. So I think that you need someone other than me to answer that question, but thank you for giving the Cleveland Clinic a appropriate mention for what Charles Modlin has arranged in the Minority Men's Health Fair.
Doctor, the Cleveland Clinic has certainly had an outstanding record in preventative medicine and helping people to understand that by stopping smoking, for example, and banning smoking on the campus, that can be a very, very positive thing. Certainly some hospitals throughout the country have followed that lead, but there always are some that are a little reluctant to do it. I'm just wondering if a cudgel could be used. I'm thinking particularly about the federal government, which provides millions of dollars to hospitals for all kinds of programs, research, what have you. What would be your feeling about requiring, in order for those money to be received by the hospital, that the hospital would have to engage in some of the programs which the Cleveland Clinic has instituted?
Go to a little side on that. I actually appreciate the question because it gives me a chance to say, what's the right public policy? There is nothing that is a greater intrinsic motivation for most Americans, according to the Gallup poll, than having a job. So if the federal government said, and the state government said, we aren't hiring smokers, that would set a tone just like the Cleveland Clinic has and some of the other hospitals in the area have. And to say, rather than say, if you will, something draconian, no smoking in America, say, we aren't going to hire you if you smoke, because it does increase the cost for everyone in America. We could save $100 billion after deducting taxes. The tobacco companies, by the way, get away inexpensively on the taxes they pay. The medical costs are someplace between 18 and 16 times as great per year. So in fact, if we said, if the state government said, I'm not after today going to hire smokers, and the federal government did the same thing, you would find the greatest, I believe, reduction in smoking rates and the greatest savings in our national budget, the greatest ability to devote things to education, social programs, and other things. It would overwhelm the savings, if you will, the sequester attempted savings. We would save at least that much, if not more, if we did that. So I think we can do that, and if I was going to be the czar, if you will, that's the move I would try and make.
Doctor, you provided so much information of material, statistics, and figures for my aging brain to absorb in such a short period of time. Are there sources afterwards that we, as laymen, can review, either a website or a book? Can you suggest something that we can review?
You know, I in the interest of fair disclosure, I do write books on the subject and do and do earn royalties on them. And there's a library here, isn't there? Yes, I think I have donated a set of them, but I will donate another set of all of the books, including the physical activity, and how you can do that is in a book called The Real Age Workout. It's almost out of print, but it isn't, because people keep buying it. But I'll make sure we have plenty of copies of that in the library, and feel free to take it out. But that's probably the best. And feel free to listen to this talk again on the website. Right?
www.cityclub.org.
www.cityclub.org. Maybe we'll get Medical Mutual to put it on their website, too.
Hi, having my first year ended on the college campus, I have noticed that there have been increases in smoking cigarettes in freshmen who enter college. Is there an approach that you would, so to say, encourage for Ohio campuses to influence for kids not to, college students for not to smoke?
Yeah, Toby Cosgrove and I, Dr. Cosgrove, who's the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, and I went to, I think it was 3 regents meetings of the regents. There are, I'm going to divert since I know a lot about this subject. We went, and in fact the regents voted unanimously to encourage the presidents of the universities to ban smoking on campus. They haven't done that yet. CSU has, but not all of them have. This is a test question back to you. And if you get this right, you get a set of the books too, or whatever else you want. Because no one should get this question right. There are 2 states that have banned, by law, smoking on any college campus. Name the 2 states.
I have a little birdie telling me Utah. And
it's actually Iowa and Oklahoma. And if you got that right, it's unbelievable, right? But in fact, there are other college campuses in the Big Ten. We've got a wimpy, if you will. Ohio State should be a leader in this. It has not been a leader at banning it. So you're right. There is 30% of the total smokers, if you will, 30% of the people who smoke in college learn during the first 6 months of their freshman year. And you probably know how that occurs. So it is, there is more smoking, and women especially learn to smoke more on college campuses. It is, in fact, 80% of all smokers in America learn by the time they leave high school. We need to do an active campaign both in high school and in colleges, and obviously the lack of prevention funding in Ohio is limiting that. So my one word is to try and get that back in the agenda.
Doctor, thank you for the vitality that you bring to this vital topic.
Thank you.
I didn't hear you mention caffeine. Could you talk about caffeine across all ages?
As I'm having some. The data on caffeine and coffee are pretty clear, and I'm going to have to talk a little bit about the additives to it as well. So there are 4 side effects of caffeine that are common: migraine headache, abnormal heartbeats or heart arrhythmias, gastric upset, and anxiety. If you don't have one of those, then the more caffeine you have, the better. Meaning it decreases Alzheimer's and Parkinson's rate and the more that you get, including six-ounce cups, the better. And it decreases 8 cancers by between 15 and 40%. So it has a direct benefit, if you will, as long as you don't have one of the side effects, with the major benefit, in fact, being memory loss or memory dysfunction. Now, there are a couple of caveats. If you get it brewed without a paper filter, so there are metal filters instead of paper, you get a compound that the paper absorbs that causes an increase in LDL cholesterol. So you want it, if you will, filtered with paper all the time. And if you take apart one of the cups and you take apart all those K-cups and things, they have paper filters in there. That's the good news. The second thing is, if you have it with casein, which is common in regular milk, it's the protein in regular milk and cream, it binds whatever it is that causes a lot of the benefit, and you don't get the benefit. So even a little of that. So if you're going to drink caffeine for your health benefit, one, if you drink it, enjoy it, and if you're going to drink it for a health benefit, you want it without any of the cow's milk product. Soy milk doesn't have that in it, almond milk doesn't have that in it. Energy drinks which are caffeinated, etc., are not the same. They often have proteins or amino acids or polypeptides in them that turn into things like red meat and like egg yolks in the recent studies that cause an increase in inflammatory markers. Yes, in the short run they boost your energy, but in the long run they kill you. So it's a slow way of committing suicide. Will that get edited out?
Governor Christie has recently put bariatric surgery into the news. What are your takes on it? Is it beneficial? What are the risks?
I don't think, one is most Americans cannot succeed or do not succeed at losing weight once they get 100 pounds or more overweight, and it is a risk to their overall health, as it was to Governor Christie's. That benefit of then doing bariatric surgery, and there are 4 or 5 different approaches to bariatric surgery. He had one approach that seems to have a lower risk, but also lower benefits than some of the others. But if you have bariatric surgery, you avoid, at least for the first 6 months and subsequent, we don't have studies greater than 2 years, you reverse about 60% of the diabetes, though there's a 60% chance. It should not be thought of as it is just bariatric surgery. Because of bariatric surgery, you change a lifestyle. And that change in lifestyle is a change in what foods you eat, the change in the amount of food you eat, it's the change in exercise. It actually involves also a change in the way you manage stress. So, in fact, there is a lot more than just the actual procedure. The procedure does have some risk with it. Obviously, when it's done in Ohio, it has lower risk than when it's done in New Jersey. I'm just joking. But in fact, part of it is choosing the surgeon and making sure there is a volume effect on the quality of surgery and the complication rate of surgery. So you want to choose surgeons and institutions that have a high practice rate of it. But you really do want to try lifestyle changes, physical activity. We have a program at the Cleveland Clinic, Lifestyle 180, which is very effective at helping people both lose weight and reverse type 2 diabetes. So there are other programs you can do that may be what you should try first, but then bariatric surgery is a viable and important option that we have in the country to decreasing, if you will, that chronic disease for the individual. When you look at it for a cost standpoint, though, that is, when you look at it from a societal cost standpoint, the data are unclear whether it saves society money in the long run. So it is, and that is obviously one of our focuses, is how do we decrease the illness costs so that we can have social programs, educational programs, and not crowd out defense as well. So it is an important consideration, and it is a viable option.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a Friday Forum featuring Dr. Michael Roizen, Chief Wellness Officer for the Cleveland Clinic. Thank you, Dr. Roizen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
PNC is proud to support the presentation of this City Club of Cleveland Friday Forum on WVIZ PBS.
Additional support comes from Cleveland State University. Support for closed caption transcripts of City Club forums is provided by the Nordson Corporation Foundation.